Hey guys, welcome back to the Curly Reader. My name's Amanda, and today we are going to be doing the mid-year book Freakout tag. So I am so excited to be doing this finally today. I have been waiting until the end of June to get all of my first 6 months of reading done so that I had a full 6 months to take into consideration when doing this. And so I know I might be a little bit late to the game, but I thought that I would still try to get this done. So as of the time of filming, I have read 88 books this year. So I thought really quick, before we get into the mid-year book Freakout, I would very, very quickly go over my annual goals that I had made and kind of do a little bit of a goal check-in. So I made 7 goals at the beginning of the year, and I keep track of them in my reading journal. And so, yeah, it'll be a really quick kind of check-in with these. But the first 2 goals were to read through 2 different book series, Harry Potter and Anne of Green Gables, and I'm doing great with both of those. I have read-alongs that I'm doing with both of them. I'm hosting the one for Anne of Green Gables, but then Harry Potter, I'm taking place in a read-along, or taking part in a read-along. And so I'm doing great with those. I have 2 books left for each of those. Those will not be an issue at all. So that's 2 of the goals. Another goal I had is to read 10 nonfiction books, and I have currently read 9. Also not an issue. That will be getting done, and I will definitely be upping that number for next year if I do carry this goal over to next year. My Goodreads goal for the year was to read 100 books, and I've, like I said, read 88 books, so that will definitely be getting done. I've done amazing with that. Then we get to the goal that I have completely failed at so far, and that is to read 5 classics. I decided at the beginning of the year I would not count my Anne of Green Gables reads towards this. I have read 0 classics so far this year. So yeah, that might need to be getting remedied here very quickly in order for me to complete this, but I just haven't been grabbing them. I haven't been gravitating towards them. I'm hoping to this summer at least get to a couple because yeah, I need to be getting that goal done. And then my other 2 goals had nothing to do with specific numbers, but were just more general goals. The first of which is to read off of my bookshelves. So of the 88 books, like read books that I currently own. Now, if I listen to an audiobook and I own a physical copy on my shelf, I count that as me reading a book that I own. So all that being taken into consideration, I have currently read 42 library books and 46 owned books, which is fantastic. So I count that as being on track. And then my other goal was to read more cover buys. So for me, that's like, whether I get it from the library or whatever, is books that I've never really heard anything else about. I'm not picking it up because it's an author that I like or that I heard somebody recommend it. It's just something I'm picking up because it struck my fancy and it looks good to me. And of the 88 books that I have read 12 cover buys, which is still okay. I would like for that to be closer to at least 25 to 30% of my reading. So we'll get there. So maybe by the end of the year, we'll get there. But that's a little bit of a check-in as far as my goals that I made at the beginning of the year and how I'm doing with them. Now let's get into the actual tag. So this is a tag that was created by Chammy, I think. I don't think that she's on YouTube anymore. I don't even think her channel exists anymore. So I cannot link her video down below, but I will link all the questions down below. But most people on BookTube do this tag. It is easy to find. Most people have already done it this year. But let's get into questions, like I said. So the first question is the best book that you have read this year. And this one was kind of hard for me because I haven't had any that were like instant all-time favorites for me yet this year, but I have had some that I've really enjoyed. The first of which is Beach Read by Emily Henry. This is actually a contemporary romance, which I don't read, but I loved this book so much because for me it was so much more than just a romance. This is about Augustus and January, and they are both writers. Augustus writes literary fiction and January writes women's fiction. And they are both in a writing slump, and they end up in lake houses that are next door to each other one summer, and they start talking, and they decide that they are going to swap genres, and he is going to write women's fiction, and she is going to write literary fiction, and a relationship blossoms out of that. And it was so good. I just loved it so much. It was so much fun. It came at just the right time for me. Yeah, so I really, really enjoyed this one. All right, another one that I really, really loved is one that I read during middle grade March, and that is The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise by Dan Gemeinhardt. This is about a little girl coyote and her dad who live on a school bus, and they just roam all over the country on the school bus. And she wants to go back home to Washington State, but she knows if she tells her dad won't go. And so she's trying to figure out how to get her dad. Sorry if you can hear this door slamming. But she's trying to figure out how to get her dad to Washington State without him realizing where they're going. And along the way, they pick up friends, and it's such a magnificent tale. It has to do a lot with grief. And so it was just so well done. I loved it so much. And then the last one that I want to add to this list is Kindred by Octavia Butler. But I read the graphic novel adaptation, which was done by Damien Duffy, I think. I forgot to write it down. But anyway, I returned it to the library today, so I'm having to put up all of my titles up here today. But, or covers up here. But this was the graphic novel adaptation of Kindred by Octavia Butler, and this was so well done. This is about, what is her name? Dana, and it takes place in the 1970s, and then one day she is just like that transported to slavery time in Baltimore, Maryland, and she's on this plantation, and she gets there, and this little boy is drowning, so she pulls him out of the water and saves his life. It's a little white boy, and through a series of events, she is transported back and forth and back and forth. But every time she goes to Maryland, back in time, she's having to save this boy's life. And yeah, so it's just about the relationship that ensues there. It's about her figuring out how to live in this time where she has no freedoms and she's very controlled, and going from a time where she has all of her freedoms to a time where she has nothing. How that that turmoil that she goes through, it was just so well done. I loved it so much. The graphic novel was horrifying, but so impactful at the same time. So yeah, those are the three that I would say would be my standouts so far this year. All right, the next question is the best sequel that you have read this year. And in preparing for this tag, I realized the only sequels I've read this year are my two series that I'm reading. So Anne of Green Gables, Harry Potter, and The Toll by Neil Shusterman. That's the only other one that I had read. So out of all of those books, my favorite so far has definitely got to be Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix. I do not remember really loving this book the first time I read it. And with this reread, this book to me was so much fun. It was so good. And then I watched the movie, and the movie was so bad. But the book was so good. And so yeah, definitely this has been my favorite sequel so far this year. All right, the next question is a new release that you have not read yet. And for me, that I want to read, that I haven't read yet, but that I want to read. And for this, I actually have this book sitting right here. This has got to be The Kingdom of Back by Marie Lu. I actually bought a new release, and I still have not read it. So this is going to be getting read this month. I'm actually planning on reading this for the Reading Rush, but little bit of a spoiler there for my Reading Rush TBR, but definitely I want to read this. This is about Mozart's sister, who was also a musician, but she couldn't really go for that as a career because she was a woman, and women were not allowed to pursue music as a career back then. They had to be wives, and so it has magical realism in it, and I'm so looking forward to this. I cannot wait to read it. So that is one that I definitely want to read. All right, so the next question is your most anticipated release for the second half of 2020. And without a doubt, this has to be Anxious People by Frederick Bachman. I know that's such a typical answer, but it just is. This sounds fantastic. It's about flawed people who make dumb decisions, and I can't wait. I can't wait for more Frederick Bachman. I need to finish reading his backlist, but I'm still excited for the new ones too. All right, the next question, I didn't number these because life, but the next one, you know. Next question is the biggest disappointment that you've had this year. And I did a whole video going over hyped books that I didn't like. Both of these were in that video, so I'm going to reference you to that to further go into details as to why I did not like these. But I did not like Children of Blood and Bone by Tomi Adeyemi and Redeeming Love by Francine Rivers were two books that I was very much looking forward to. I was expecting them to be like 4 or 5 stars, and they were like 1, 2 stars. So very disappointed in both of those. And if you want to know more about why, you can check out my video on hyped books that I did not like. So those two for sure. The biggest surprise of the year is going to go to 2 cover buys or cover borrows. One was a cover buy, one was a cover borrow from the library. They're both middle grade. The one that I got from the library is called Free Lunch by Rex Ogle. And this was a book that I just randomly picked up off the shelf at the library, and I thought the spine looked fun. I thought the cover looked fun. So I borrowed it and I read it, and it was a 5-star read, hands down, fantastic book. It's a memoir by Rex about his childhood living in poverty, and he was put in the free lunch program at school, and his feelings about that as a kid, his feelings towards his mom and their living situation, and just what was going on, how he dealt with kids at school, all of that. Heavy trigger warnings for child abuse in this. It was hard to read for sure, but so important for kids who need this type of thing, who are going through this type of thing, that are feeling hopeless through this living situation. And so highly recommend this, but like I said, trigger warnings for that. And definitely I would read this before you just handed it to a kid for sure. But I, as an adult, got so much out of it and really loved it. The other one that I'm going to say for this is Everything Else in the Universe by Tracy Holzer. This is one that as soon as I finished it, like the day I finished it, I gave it to my next door neighbor to read. It is a historical fiction middle grade set during the Vietnam War, and it follows the main character. I think her name's Lucy. And it follows her dad was called up for the medical draft. He was a doctor, and he ended up coming home missing an arm. And so it's just about navigating that and grieving the lost future that she thought she was going to have, that he thought he was going to have. There's also a lot of discussion in this book about the climate within the United States during the Vietnam War, and how, even between veterans, like veterans of World War II, and how they were treating the Vietnam vets. And it was not pretty, guys. It was horrible and heartbreaking, and this book just tore my heart into pieces. Lucy meets a friend, and he has history with the war. He has baggage that comes with that, and it was so beautiful. I loved it so much, and had no idea. And so that one, those two very big surprises. Love them both. Go read them both and then come talk to me about them, because nobody's read them, and I need you to go read them. All right. The next one is your new favorite author, and it can either be a new to you or a debut author. And for this, I did not bring any of my books up here because I'm ill prepared. But this one is going to go to Amor Towles, who wrote A Gentleman in Moscow, which I read last month, and I loved the writing in this book. I actually DNF'd the audiobook twice and thought I would never get back to it. And then Katie at Life Between Words read it and raved about it, and then was able to do a live stream with Amor Towles. And so I was like, I gotta read this book. I really, really want to read it. And so I just bought the book, read the book, and it was amazing. It got 5 stars. It's not like an all-time favorite of mine, but it was so good, and the writing was so beautiful. I recently purchased his other book, Rules of Civility, and I'm looking forward to reading that as well. And so I'm saying that that's a new favorite author, but I've only ever read one book by him. So take that for what it is. All right, the next question is your newest fictional crush, and I don't really do fictional crushes. There are books, male characters in books that I like for the person that they are with. I don't like them for me. But I will say that this year was my first exposure to Gilbert Blythe, and especially in the later books, I love the way that Gilbert loves Anne. I just, be still my heart. I love it so much. So we're just going to say Gilbert Blythe for this one. All right, newest favorite character. All right, so for this, I'm going to say the Count from Gentleman in Moscow. Gentleman in Moscow is a character-based story. It is a book that is about Count Alexander Rostov, who starts in 1922 in Moscow, and he was an aristocrat. And during that time, with the Bolsheviks, right after the revolution, the aristocrats were pretty much put under their thumb. And so that didn't make sense. Whatever. He was taken to court over a poem that he wrote, and he was sentenced to house arrest at the Metropole Hotel, which is a massive hotel in Moscow. And so it just follows him from 1922 through like 1950 something or another, after World War II. And it follows his whole life. So you're really focused on this one character. And I feel like character-focused stories are easier to fall in love with the character because that's what it's about. So this one definitely, I don't read a lot of character-based stories. This one, though, I love the Count, and he was so precious, and his friends were so precious, and I loved them. So definitely the Count in this one. But also, another book that I read recently, As Bright as Heaven, by Susan Meisner. The mom in that book, Pauline Bright, I loved her so much. I loved the insight into her mind and just the way that she dealt with things. I really appreciated her too. So she would be my second pick. All right. A book that made you cry is going to definitely be the only book that made me like sob cry this year so far is The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise, because it's about a kid in grief and adults loving on her. And I love it. It just, yes. So I definitely cried for that one, and that's the only one that made me like sob cry. A lot. I had a few other books that made me like tear up and maybe like a tear here and there, but like Coyote Ugly, totally different thing. The Remarkable Journey of Coyote Sunrise was like heaving, like ugly crying. So the next question is a book that made you happy, and for this I'm going to say Artemis Fowl by Owen Colfer. This was my first time I had ever read Artemis Fowl. I read it in preparation for the new movie release, which after I read the book, I watched the movie trailer, and now I don't even want to watch the movie because it looks so bad. But I read the book, and I love the book, and it was just so much fun. It is about Artemis Fowl, who is like an evil mastermind genius kid, and he decides that he's going to steal some leprechaun gold, except leprechauns in this world are not like the little characters dressed in green that just like chase rainbows. They're actually like super stealthy fairy creatures, and it's all about like the fairy underworld, and they're like all techie, and it is it's very fun. Very, very fun. I'm looking forward to reading the next one. So that one made me happy. The next question is the most beautiful book that you acquired this year. And this one is definitely, you guys all know how much I love this book cover. Let's do a close-up because we all know I love this book. Love that one. The other one that I bought this year that I love, which I can never show because it's so reflective, is Wolf Hollow by Lauren Woke. Obviously, can you tell I like trees? But these are my two favorite covers ever that I've purchased. And then the last question is a book that you still need to read this year. So at the beginning of the year, I did a video on 20 books I want to read in 2020. And this is how well that's going. You see all those empty books? Those are all the books I still have to read. So all of those. So I've read 5 and I DNF'd 1. So I have 14 books left on that list that I still need to read. And then also Wolf Hollow, because I have been saying since the beginning of the year that I really need to read this, and I still haven't read this. So this needs to get read before the end of the year. That's it. Those are all the questions for the mid-year book freakout tag. I think there's a question about like, do you have a favorite book influencer? And I don't. I just love everybody. So I'm not going to answer that. And I'm not going to tag anybody because everybody does this anyway. And if you want to do it, do it. And if you don't, don't. So that's it for the mid-year book freakout tag. If you've read any of the books that I have featured today, I would love to hear your opinions about them down below. What is your favorite book that you've read so far this year? Let me know that down below as well. And other than that, I hope that you enjoyed this, and I hope that you stick around and subscribe. And until next time, See ya.